Whatever. He's here.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
My preference is for POIs to be made in the chat, but by raising your hands. Very happy to be here. Good luck, everyone. Congrats for breaking. Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, this debate is not necessarily about happiness, but this debate is about dissatisfaction and the way that we see things. Three things that I'm going to prove in my speech. First, how we'll have less sadness in our side of the house. Second, how we have more gratitude in our side of the house. And third, how we have more mental health in our side of the house. The reason why I'm going to prove these impacts is ultimately why I'm going to prove that an impact of our case, the greatest one, is on how we have better happiness. But notice how the debate is not necessarily about that. What we understand as the comparative in this debate is the way that we see things and that we imagine how they could have been different. And the info slide makes that real clear. So let's understand the context in which we imagine how things could have been different. We understand that the moment when we stop and think, oh, what could have done different are in three main situations. First one is when we're insecure, is when we don't know if we generated good aftermaths related to us or like how things are going in general. Second is when we are sad because now we tend to like more and irrationally overthink about things and the reason that makes us sad. And third and formally, when we're in interactions with others, which may suddenly lead us to a certain reflection on if we're enjoying college, if how our life is doing in general, and how we reflect on that. The comparative is not necessarily with the status quo, but with worlds where the prevalence is in which people look at that more like in the negative side of things to comfort themselves and say, "Oh, I'm not in the negative side." And second, our competitive in this, that is to be the comparative of government in this debate. And second, the world of opposition, where people look at like the best side to say, oh, we're not included in that, things could have been better, which leads us to like more inconformity and to a confirmation bias in the moments in which we're insecure. And notice how the moments in which we are happy are less minimizable when we stop and think when they could have been worse, as they are going to argue and say, oh, in their side of the house, they may like have less happiness in general because of two things. First, happiness is more scarce in the world. We have like less moments in which we have like a super lapse of happiness and feel like super satisfied with stuff, just because this is not a spontaneous feeling of us. We tend more to overthink about things and like look at the main points of reform. And just because we have like a day by day life, like more stable, more static. And second, because the moments in which we are happy, we're just enjoying the moment and we just don't stop and think, oh, things could have been worse or things could have been even better. We do not believe that this is something plausible to assume. So basically, the comparative in the world that we are defining here is that it is better if in the moments in which we are feeling unsatisfied, the moments that we don't know if we are satisfied or not, at the moment in just we stop and think how life has been, it is better for us to feel that it could have been worse and therefore to be grateful for that, to be less sad for that in the moments where this is something that we could accept and to struggle less mentally. Let's go for the two pieces of framing that are very important in this debate. Notice, panel, how the ultimate goal of people, whether through money, through power, through political divisions, to any decisions in life, or just to making jokes in general, interacting with others, loving, hating, is to feel happy and to feel that we have well-being. We express our feelings ultimately as a manner of like interacting with others to try to get something in exchange as happiness. We try to buy things because we want to maximize our satisfaction with the goods and services that are available to us. We have unlimited wants in the world that cannot be satisfied. And in the end, three obstacles have happened for this. First, we feel sad because we cannot achieve that, and like as a counter feeling of happiness and well-being when this doesn't happen and when bad moments happen. Second, dissatisfaction as a whole because we didn't achieve the aftermath that we were expecting, and we understand that therefore it could have been better. And third, we have mental health struggles, something that is being intensified in a world where we are being shown that we could have had more because of capitalism and that we can have everything. In our world, from the from the primordial parts of humanity, everybody just felt that, okay, we don't need to have like an incessant desire, or at least not to feel sad about it, but because things could have been worse. This is the kind of audacity that we can still have in our world, in our side of the house. And the other thing that is really important here is how power disparity, and therefore the reasons that lead us to irrationally feel bad or just to overthink about our reality, are just something that is symmetric in the both sides of the house. In both sides, that is going to be disparity regarding how much money I have to acquire things to satisfy my unlimited wants, or how much political power I have to attain a certain degree of liberty that I believe to be desirable or acceptable. But in the end of the world, it is all about conformism and how you look at our situation, and how conformism in an intensified manner in our side of the house leads to less sadness. In the end of the day, notice how sadness and how we feel about that comes after a reflection, and how we have a confirmation bias to ourselves reflecting on what just happened. It's just when I'm in the shower and I remember about that debate that I lost in the third round. Oh my God, I could have run that argument. It could have been better. I could have done it better. I'm just sad. I just remember the things more often. And in the end of the day, if I have more conformism on that, and if I imagine that I could have been worse, I could have had a fourth place instead of a third. In the end of the day, we just have less moments of sadness as a whole. And this in two ways impacts our case. First, we have less complaints about the reality, which leads us to more gratitude, which we're going to elaborate in a minute. But also, we minimize the moments in which we believe that we face hardships, which leads us to save more energy for the moments that we can really struggle, the moments that are unacceptable, and that in our side of the house we are going to notice that it could have been. There's the worst part and there's the best part. We only fit in the worst part. That is to say, when we're really under unacceptable conditions, we are going to complain about that because it makes sense for us, even though we try to be optimistic. Yes, I accept it.
If everything is symmetric in your world, why is this the only way to access some level of happiness? Other things can also make you happy about your losses.
Well, the first step for you is to understand that there's a difference between conformism and optimism and satisfaction as a whole, which is what I'm trying to explain in this debate. But the second thing here is, as I explained, that we have less complaints about our reality and we minimize the hardships weight in our reflections about our reality. Ultimately, we have more gratitude, which leads us to first, more sense of fulfillment, which helps us, which is important because it helps us understand that we are pursuing happiness and we're in the right pathway. We complain less about our reality. We have less mental struggles because of that. Second one, we have stronger bonds between people because we tend to like have less expectations that are like beyond the average that we have with our friends, with our family, and interactions that we have. On the comparative in the debate, they imagine we could have had better friends. They could have done something different. They could have helped me in this situation. And in the end of the day, we tend to like minimize it less, and we tend to have more gratitude, which leads us to more gratitude about our reality and to pursuing that sense of fulfillment. And in the end, we have less feeling that we are being unlucky because many things we cannot control, such as disparity of power. And in the end of the day, how much we believe that we are lucky and that we are blessed and we should thank for our reality is something that really matters in this debate, or at least is something that leads us to much sadness and doesn't let us enjoy our reality. Thank you so much.
All right, thank PN for round of remark. Then I'd like to invite the leader just whenever ready.
Can you guys confirm that I'm visible and audible?
Yeah, yes.
Give me a second to pull out my timer. POIs verbally, preferably. Okay, what I'm gonna do in my speech is first I'm going to take down OG because they have a few ways they think about the life about real life, which are not actually, and happiness and sadness, which are not actually accurate to how the world looks. So the bulk of their case is basically they're gonna have less sadness on their side of the house. What we say is that they're gonna have less sadness in the moment, because the distinction they don't make, and here it's extremely important, panel, is that the reason you're oftentimes dissatisfied with your life and unhappy in particular moments is not because you are not complacent with those moments and you're not thinking that it could be worse. It's actually because you're dissatisfied with the very bulk of your life. You're dissatisfied with your relationships because they're not good enough. You're dissatisfied with your job because you didn't take that promotion, because you didn't take a better job, a job that could have been better, right? You're dissatisfied because maybe you stayed in a relationship out of complacency, even though you're not in love with that particular person, right? The biggest problem we have with happiness nowadays is the fact that the conditions of our life are not as good as they could possibly be, and we're aware of that, right? So on their side of the house, maybe they have less sadness in the moment because they're just shrugging it off by being complacent and saying, you know what, it's fine, it could have been worse. But in the long run, you can see that you build a lot of resentment, you build a lot of imagining what your potential could have been like, right? Because fundamentally, we believe everyone knows what their potential can be. Everyone knows they deserve good friends, they deserve to respect themselves, they deserve a good partner, they deserve, they know that they want to leave something behind. So the more you don't actually try to opt into your potential and doing all of these changes, the more sad you're going to be later on in life, the more you're going to regret your life, and you're going to get on the deathbed, and you're gonna regret the fact that you didn't actually fulfill all of your potential. We believe that this is unlocked specifically on our side of the house. But secondly, why we're also gonna have a lot of happiness on our side of the house, specifically by their framing. And here I have, I think, two things. First of all, a lot of this happiness actually happens in moments where you're prouder, where, for example, you're staying with your kids at their birthday, right? We believe that in these moments of happiness, you're not actively thinking about how things can be different, right? Because you're just enjoying the moment. You just won the ESL Finals. You're very proud of yourself. You're unlikely to think about, oh, how could these things have been different, right? So we still unlock a lot of happiness in those moments when you don't particularly want to think about how things can be different. Second point, the fact that the satisfaction actually comes from changing the things around you. Most of our satisfaction comes from the process, not the end result, right? So if we can prove on our side of the house that this process is a lot more fulfilling for the people, we can see that we have way more fulfillment on our side of the house, as opposed to their side of the house, where they just have a bunch of complacency. And last idea, the fact that even if there's gonna be a bit less happiness on our side of the house, at the end of the day, your life is going to be better, and that is going to yield better results. It's going to yield to less resentment and things of the sort. Now I'm going to move on to the two things I'm going to talk about in my speech. First of all, why it's better for the individual themselves, for their mental health and for their life in general, to think that things could have been better. And secondly, why it's better for society and why we have way more societal change, and the fact that this mentality encourages progress and innovation. So first of all, what is the actual impact on individuals? We believe that comparatively on OG side of the house, people are okay with bad situations, right? We know that there's a lot of suffering in the world. We know that things happen that maybe we can control, maybe we can't control, that are just horrible situations, right? On their side of the house, there is no impulse to change the situation. There's no impulse to change anything, right? Because things could be worse. We can see that people just end up in this sort of complacency. It's very, very similar to just a situation where you're okay with anything that happens to you, right? To a very high degree. We believe that this specifically in the individuals manifests, for example, in staying in a toxic relationship, even though you know it's bad, but you think that it's okay because it could have been worse. They could have been physically abusive to you. They could have been sexually abusive to you, but they're not. They just say that they're not proud of you or things like that, right? There's just small things that could have been better, but you're not focusing on that. You're just focusing on the fact that things can be worse, right? On our side of the house, we have three mechanisms here. First of all, it's way more likely that people are going to see the issues that are going on in their life. They're going to see the fact that they are in a toxic relationship, and that is going to build up. No, thank you. That is going to build up. They're going to see the issues in their day-to-day lives. Second mechanism, the fact that they're more likely to actually look for solutions, right? Let's see how things could have been better. Let's see what I can actually change in order to, no, thank you. In order to get to a life that is way better on my side of the house, right? It's way more likely that when you're in a toxic relationship on our side of the house, you're going to see that problem A, and then think, what are the solutions I can do? I can go to therapy, for example, or things like that, right? And third mechanism, the fact that you build resilience, because in this process of always trying to find solutions and beating your head up with solutions over and over again, you're more likely to build up resilience to failure, which in change is more likely to make you be okay with continuing to strive for better things on our side of the house, right? Sure, I'll take that POI.
Out of all these things that you therefore develop a sense of like, I want to do something about it, how many of those things can you control? How many of those things do you have power over?
Okay, I think as human beings, we have power over a lot of things. I think we have power over the jobs we choose. I think we have power over choosing a university that's better for us. I think we have power to control our friend groups. I think we have power to control the relationships we're in. I think the examples that I give you with toxic relationships are genuinely things that you can impact. And these are also small behaviors, right? It's the fact that maybe I feel like I'm a failure. Maybe I'm not good at debate, right? But instead of saying, when I get like a third, instead of saying, you know what, it could have been worse, it's a fourth, I say, you know what, I could have been first. What can I do in order to be better? What can I do in order to improve myself? And then I'm going to actually put in that effort, unlike like on your side of the house, when you just stay in complacency, I'm going to put in that effort, and maybe at the next tournament, I'm going to break ESL and I'm going to play the finals. And you know what? That wouldn't have happened. And it's way more fulfilling on our side of the house. It brings way more happiness because, again, you're actually taking accountability of your life. You're breathing this sense of responsibility. You're actually getting satisfaction from the process and from changing things around you, right? So second point, very quickly, how it actually impacts society. And we think two main things here. First of all, it encourages progress and innovation. And here we can see specifically, for example, when you work in a team, when you're in a business, or when you want to create a business, it's way more likely that you're going to see flaws in a particular product and think, this is a very good idea of a product that I want to create myself. Or it's way more likely that you're going to look at your team dynamic or at the problem you have in your company and say, hey, I noticed this problem. This can potentially be better. I want to improve it. Let's look at the solution, right? It builds problem solving skills. But also extremely importantly, on the topic of politics and bigger issues, we can see that it's way more likely that on our side of the house, normal people are going to engage in discord that fights for their rights or that fights against systematic injustice, right? Because you're not just saying, you know what, in theory, all of us have the same amount of rights. If we just look at the laws that exist, all of us are equal. No, you're going to think, how can it actually be better? And then you're going to realize, oh, there's systematic issues, right? There's problems like climate change. Oh, it could have been worse. We could have been burning right now, but we see this issue actually existing. It's way more likely that people are going to protest on our side of the house. So in our side of the house, we have more satisfaction, more happiness, more long-term meaningfulness, and we also have more societal change. All
right. Thank Alo for a wonderful remark. Then I'd like to invite the DPN whenever ready.
All right. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Great, thank you. I will take my PIs on the chat, and please do only make PIs on the chat. And I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. This debate is not as OO has set it up. The comparative is not illusion versus realism. This debate is pretty much having a more optimism view of the world, or like a more satisfied view of the world, versus a more pessimist or a more insufficient view of how things play out in a life. Their whole characterization is not fair and is not realistic to this debate. So how do the works actually look like? This debate is about how, in the world of proposition, where you have a half-full perspective of the world, which means that you are satisfied with things that you have, or you're more grateful about the things that you have because you look at the world as something that could have been worse, which means that you value more the things that you have right now. But most important, in the proposition side of the house, people don't think that what they have is not enough, is not good enough, that their life is not what they were achieving for, because they understand that all their hard work, everything they have gone through has been like enough, and what they have achieved, the place that they are in their lives right now, is good. The comparative is that in opposition, they have this half-empty view, which looks like seeing life as not good enough. The grass of your neighbor is greener means that you're always striving for something that you do not have. You're always going through this constant marathon towards the impossible, the next big thing, the next better thing. Never what you have is enough. Why this is problematic? Onto the clash of dealing with satisfaction and dissatisfaction in the world. They talk about how in our world you're only able to deal with the sadness of the moment, but not in the longer term. This is not like, they never explain why this is true, but I don't get why we're gonna be resentment if our world is the one where we actually are more grateful and value better the things that we have now or in the future. They have to explain why is it likely that we are more dissatisfied with the world when the comparatives literally in their side of the house, where they're more pessimistic towards everything in their lives. We already gave you a bunch of examples on this. But most important, on the clash of happiness and fulfillment. They say that pretty much they're happier in their side, people are happier in their side of the house, but they don't necessarily give reasons why this is true. I don't think this is likely to be true for all the reasons that we have given to throughout this debate. But most important, I think that what Seema explained to you is about how it is most important to see life as with a half-full perspective towards the hardest moments of your lives. Panel, note that life is not easy. The majority of your life is going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. You're not going to achieve what you really wanted, not because you do not not have like power over the world, but most important because sometimes decisions are not up to you. You might have studied a lot for a very important exam, but at the end you did not pass, or you might really have been the best person for the job, but you're someone who's like a Latino woman like me and is not gonna get the job because a white woman got it in your place. There are things in the world that are unequal and you cannot control it. That's what we're talking about. The thing is that the majority of your life is going to be made by those results that you have no control over. And we think that it's better to approach life with a perspective that is more optimistic than a pessimistic one. Why do we think this is better? Samuel explained to you that the reason for that is to have more hope, understanding of our contest, and are more grateful. The implication of this is that only in our world, when we have this view of a more positive life or of a more positive achievements, we're actually able to enjoy those moments. We're not only enjoying like the happiest moments of our lives, but we're enjoying the process. And note that the process is the most chat. The process is the most constant step of your life. So only in our side of the house, when we're not constantly satisfied, when you're not constantly like blaming the world or blaming yourself or blaming the people around you about the things that you do not have, you're actually able to be happy. The comparative is that in their side of the house, they're not more happy, they're less fulfilled, specifically because they're always running from this next big thing. They're always trying to get better and never actually enjoying the moments that they have right now. What they say to us is that, oh, in their side of the house, you actually have more incentives to do better things, to get better things, because they now are not satisfied with everything. But the point is that the comparative is not one where people do not see the problems versus one where people see it. The comparative is in which world people are actually better able to deal with challenges. So we think that when engaging with this clash of like satisfaction and fulfillment, is more likely that people are going to be happier in a world where they see like their lives in a more positive manner versus a world where like they have a more pessimistic view of their lives. Before I continue, take a POI from this second half.
You probably see other people going on and taking over you in life. You anyway still compare yourself with other people. How do you cope with that in your side of the house?
Yeah, the difference is that the level in which you compare yourself to other people, the level in which you feel jealous about other people. This debate is not about being like 100% happy versus 100% sad. It's about the middle term in it. So we think that it's more likely to believe that the main perspective that you have in your life is one where you're like more positive about things versus the one where you're more negative. We're not talking that people are gonna be 100% happy in a world. The difference is that they're gonna have more incentives. It's gonna be easier for them to reconcile with things that are hard in their lives. Now, engage with the clash of progress and innovation. Their main claim is basically saying that people are more able to see flaws in problems in their reality, and because of that, they will be better able to solve them. Their main example is about a toxic relationship where people in our side of the house apparently are just gonna stay with like this shitty guy and not move on. Why I don't think they have enough reasons to explain why this is true. First, they never explain to us why necessarily in our side of the house we do not seek problems or we do not seek innovation or like a better ability to change our reality. I think that what is likely to happen is that changing a reality, changing a problem, or moving away from like a toxic relationship, something very hard. It's something that is very like challenging, something that you are gonna get disappointed in the process, and it's something that demands resilience and demands persistence. Why do you think that it's more likely that people will be more resilient in our side of the house and better able to do with progress and innovation? First, because people have more hope. They understand that they're going to have a hard time at this exact moment, but in the future it's going to get better, or at least they know that it could have been much worse. But second, I think that people have more incentives to believe that they have going to have a better outcome than what they have right now. The comparative is that in there's not the house. The mentality is not this one. The mentality is that, oh, things are gonna get worse. Things are gonna get harder. This toxic relationship is not gonna get better. My next relationship is gonna be even worse. The outcome of this is that in their side of the house, they have this cycle of overthinking, of anxiety, depression, because they're not able to cope with the problems of their lives. Panel, at the end, you should weigh this debate with the world that is better able to deal with challenges. They have a better perspective of the hard times of life versus a world where you do not cope with this. We only see the problems in your life. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank DPN for a wonderful remark. I'd like to welcome Diallo whenever ready.
Hi, am I audible and visible?
Yeah, yes, the both.
Yeah. POI, I'm gonna ask for the POI at probably 5 to 5:30 minutes, preferably from closing, and I'm gonna take one POI. Don't badger. Yeah. Before that, thanks Abrar bhai, for being here, and thanks to my teammate Ania. This is our only second tournament, and we're breaking in ACL. It's a lot. Thanks for dealing with me. Other than that, UCLA as a tournament means a lot to me for a few reasons. Because like last year last year in UCLA, I was doing final in Novice. This year I'm doing final in ESL. Hopefully next year I'm gonna be doing something better than that, right? Uh, Thanks to the Orcom for doing arranging such an amazing tournament. Being said, let's come to the debate, right? Give me just 5 seconds. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. In a world, people are satisfied with what they have and constantly trying to do better, things in the world that freeze and no real change happen. The world manifests in both individual and communal level. And I'm going to describe both of these things in my speech further. But let's deal with what OG tells us, right? OG's first claim is you are dissatisfied with life, and that is bad. And that's a huge push from them, right? I have 4 layers of response to that. One, I think that is not that bad, right? It is just a feeling that I might be not doing enough, right? If it actually that serious, you can go through mental health help and get checked, right? Secondarily, and note that it also works as your motivation to do better things. Like if you are satisfied, like give a better speech in the next tournament. Third, it makes you feel the happiness even more intensely, which is if government is trying to set the metric of happiness, then we also get it better in our side, because now you feel like I have gone through shit in my life. This achievement I had, I fucking deserve it. In the clash of happiness, we simply win, right? Because of the intensity of the happiness. Fourthly, I don't understand why happiness is the most important thing in the world. They never tell you why this debate should be just based on happiness, when the trade-off is systematic change and no change, right? Secondarily, they tell you about like better relationship. Not that mechanized well, but I'm still gonna respond, right? Two things. I don't think you expect that much from your friends, right? What you do expect from them is like you want your friends to be with you when you're going through breakup. It is unlikely that you take huge loan from them, right? Secondarily, the moment you don't even expect anything from them, they don't even feel like they should be there, right? But in our world, your relationship better because you expect that and your good friends are there for you to support that, and you spend time when you do that, right? That makes your relationship good. In terms of relationship class, we also win. And third thing that was came from a POI that said that how many things you have like in control. If closing comes up with that, we preemptive that already with this, like what I'm about to say. 3 things, right? Very important thing to notice, panel. You don't really feel sad and dissatisfied to the things that you fucking cannot control, right? The feelings that you feel sad and dissatisfied about the things that you can control, right? The sinking feeling you have, most probably that the things you can control. Impact of it. You try to change the things that are in your control. Okay, back to our construction, right? I'll take that POI in 5 and 7 minutes. Okay. On individual level, you probably try to get a better job or better housing or better experience in life. This is crucial for a few reasons. One, we are biological animals, thus getting rewards of our hard work really makes us feel better. Secondarily, we are all born in different circumstances, different contexts, right? When we had no in different contexts. In our world, you try to make best use of where you were born. If it's a third world country where you work hard, get out of there and do great things. Notice this journey brings immense happiness to you. Thirdly, this is good for the world for few things. One, you try to change the circumstance, you make your country better. The impact of it is you make that place a little better for the upcoming generation that is to come, right? But in their world, you don't really do anything for your country or for the circumstance you were born in. Secondly, in order to climb that ladder of success, you probably had to go through school, study extensively, and that also creates economic value, right? Notice that creates a supply in economy and change like things, right? Second, like things we have mechanized. World problem, right? There are multiple problems in the world, i.e., 20% of people go hungry every night to sleep and war, stuff like that. The moment you're okay with your own life and you don't even care about other problems too, because the mindset become, okay, 20% haven't eaten, but 80% did, right? The moment in time you preach that narrative to your own self, you even feel like stopping these things from happening to others, right? How that manifests? One, that looks like you don't do activism or funding to important things. But secondly, you don't have the discourse about the problem, about the world, right? And thirdly, that means you fundamentally become very selfish with your own metric of like and feel satisfied. Fourthly, notice when people think like, oh, things are good, but could be better is the moment they try to change, actually like push for change, right? And thirdly or fourthly, war-torn communities, right? In this world, people who are in war-torn countries will probably just feel okay, right? Because hey, probably I'm in war condition, but hey, I'm not dead, but I'm not poor. That creates a positive feedback loop for them, right? And I think that is principally unjustified. Why? Because now they themselves don't think they should care to bring necessary changes in their life. And moreover, like international community also don't like make a blind eye to them because they feel like, okay, like they're like things are not that bad, right? Satisfaction from changing. I have already told you how we win on the metric of happiness. Before I move on, POI from closing.
What is
Opening.
someone that is in a war situation supposed to do better to improve their situation, like you just said they can do?
Very good question. That's a very important class, right? That is very, very not important what you can do it. The feeling that you feel like, okay, if things were better, you try to think that are in your control. That means even in that war-torn country, you probably try to build for it house. You probably try to tell your kids that okay, things gonna be better because and that's also manifest in international community as well. That is when international community is also like, okay, things are bad. Oh yeah, probably 60,000 people like in their world, you feel like 7 billion people are there. What if 20,000 people died, right? In our world comparative, you say, okay, every fucking life is valuable. Let's do something that cannot continue. Okay. Let's talk about innovation, right? Which Anya told you, right? I think the world is ever so changing, and thus people have different needs. They face different challenges every day, right? This in turn creates an urgency to solve problems right and new and better ways. In our world, you have better chances of trying to solve all of these problems. Like what is the fundamental reason we do research and invest so much our hard-earned money? Because we want to change things. We want new things. Thirdly, what is then why is then the innovation is so important? I think Anya already told you the situation is climate change, right? Which poses an existential threat to humanity. But it also means like new virus strains like emerging, right? This means we always need to be very cautious and always innovate new things and like solve new problems and be satisfied with that. On what metric we should like vote for OO? O gives you like how you can be happiness, even though happiness should not be the most important metric. I think you should be judging this debate. Secondarily, how it manifests on personal level, how what you do for your own self and how that also helps the others in return in your country or in your community who are gonna be coming and upcoming next generation, right? But I also tell you that how it manifests in for the communal level, like people who are in one-term communities. The moment in time you think that okay, things need to change, things cannot go away like that, even if the vast majority of the world is good, even if 1% or 0.1% people are doing bad, that is bad. Very, very proud to win this debate.
All right. Thank the yellow for running for a mock. I'd like to welcome member of government whenever ready.
Hi, can I get a confirmation if I'm perfectly audible and visible?
Yeah, you are.
Starting in 3, 2, 1. Me and Monmoy reserve broke in this tournament. The point in time we were thinking we could have done better. We could have made it to the finals. We were very sad. Then we started thinking, you know what? We could have not broken at all. We could have not had the opportunity to make this far as all. That instantly made us very, very happy. With that being said, I'll also show you as to why this mechanism and when we win this debate actually actualizes in the real world, right? 4 really quick pieces of opening opposition rebuttals. They tell you we remove small-time dissatisfaction. We don't think that's the case. First is that individual decisions that you take take broadly characterizes the broader outlook of your life. That is, this leads to efforts for you to maximize the long-term solutions, which means that even if, like, they have to claim that if it is short-term in nature, you can gather courage and resources instead of taking critical, irrational decisions like causing suicide. And the result is that now you have more chances of maximizing your long-term solutions in and of itself. They don't really give me any comparative as to why long-term happiness is better under their side of the world. Third is that could have been worse mindset does not automate to complete dumb fuckery, that like you still have the idea to understand what's right and what's wrong. That is like toxic relationships, discrimination, and stuff like that are all things that are very, very bad, and you still can understand those things, right? Thirdly, is that O just loses out on weighing because they only talk about situations where you have a control variables. I will tell you why vast majority of mental health situations are in situations where you don't have any sort of control. Fourthly, I kind of like got this stats that I really just wanted to point out. 80% people are eating, 20% hunger, so you don't feel for them. I feel like it's just empirically false. I think like 60% people are like in hunger, so you probably feel better about them, or like probably feel more empathetic towards them, right? Moving on to our constructives then. We're going to have two main pieces of extension. Why people are more grateful. This was touched upon by opening government, but will give you better mechanization and broader structural impacts. Second thing I'm going to talk about is that how you have small victories in terrible situations, and that leads to greater impacts. First is that recognize that most human interactions have some positive value to your life, but you don't recognize that under their side of the world in a comparative where you have so many other things that's going on and constantly overburdened by the negativity, right? This does not happen under their side of the world, which means that under our side of the world, you are more likely to address the positive changes that happens through every single interaction that you make with every single human being out there, right? So the fact that Monmoy agreed to team up with me, I am more grateful about this fact instead of the whole thing, instead of having the negative outlook that we are not winning debate or something like that, right? The impact of this is that you get more community, right? You get more agency to maximize the number of friends or the number of people you have good relationships with, but secondly, just improves relationships in general, right? Recognize that OG does not flesh out these impacts as well, but we also tell you why gratefulness is an extremely, extremely important tool for making any kind of structural changes, right? This is one of the clearest ideas that can be taught to people like children, or can be taught in universities, and therefore most countries who have taken this approach have been very, very progressive in a very short amount of time. The biggest example is Canada, who have like been very progressive in the last 200 years, and the mechanism they used was being extremely grateful and showcasing this gratefulness to the indigenous community whose lands we are living in right now, right? We tell you that this gratefulness can pan out not only in individual circumstances as OG talks, but also in structural situations and create more progressive society. And this has way more long-term impacts as we help in infinite number of people in the long run. That is a differentiator from opening government. Second unique piece of extension under our side of the world, right? We have small victories in terrible, terrible situation. Recognize that most mental health situations, if you're in a war situation, if you're in a corporate status quo where you cannot climb the ladder, or if you're in a capitalistic world that constantly tells you to do something that you don't have, I feel like in and of itself, these are situations that just kind of fiats, but recognize that you don't have the capacity to solve those things. Even if you tries to claim like, you don't really feel bad about those things, I feel like I would still feel bad about the fact that like, maybe racism I cannot solve, but like the effects of racism still kind of affect me. So those are all pretty bad fucking things under their side of the world. So I would still probably feel pretty bad about it, right? Then what happens under our side of the world, right? Half full mindset allows you to think of how things could be much, much worse, right? It allows you to pinpoint the small victories that you have in these terrible situations. The fact that like, even in a world where you have absolutely no control, right? So if I am a person in Palestine, and if like, I don't know, like if someone who actually like passed away, I have no control over the war, but I can still understand the fact that like I have some other community members in my life that I can enjoy, right? This means that we allow these maximization of happiness in these small situations, or even in individual situations, right? We tell you that like this kind of will allow you to maximize your long-term situations, because in those instances you are able to maximize your mental health resources or just be better, right? What are the impacts of this? Later. impacts of this is in threefold. First is that your recovery is much better, right? In these critical situations, you take irrational decisions, as OG pointed out. They don't tell you that in these critical situations, you take decisions like causing suicides or causing suicides where it's terminal, right? We tell you that at those points in time, you can literally act like literally be like your life could have been better and therefore live 1 month more. In that 1 month, you can take mental health resources and probably not think about suicide at all. Second, we talk about movement, right? Recognize under our side of the world, people have movements are made of individuals in and of itself, right? When people think like your life could be better, that is the point in time people don't go through the struggles of movement, right? And if they don't go through the struggles of movement, they just live their individual selfish lives. Is the point in time when movements are fragmented, when movements don't have enough buy-in, right? We tell you inherently why movements are way better on our side of the world, because people feel united and there is a much, much larger buy-in and much capacity for movements to create any sort of change to begin with, right? For the comparative under their side of the world is people start daydreaming about situations that they largely cannot control. And that is just within the fact that like a vast majority of things and the most important vulnerable mental health stakeholders are ones where you cannot control the environment variables around you. For all those reasons, we tell you that under their side of the world, you are hoping for something that you have no access to, and therefore you are unable to derive any form of satisfaction out of it. We tell you intrinsically why our side of the world has more capacity of change. Why do we then win this debate? We tell you why. First, we talk to you as to why structural changes can be done through gratefulness and therefore much amount of change than opening government. Second, we tell you why there are critical situations that are the most vulnerable actors within this debate, and therefore we improve their mental health state. Thirdly, we tell you why social movements are much better because we have much capacity for buy-in. Very proud to propose.
All right. Thank MG for wonderful remark. Just to note that please time the speeches, or please manage the timing of your speech so that you can take at least one POI in the speech. It is very important engagement for the opening. Yeah. I'd like to welcome Emma.
Hi, just give me 30 seconds. Hi, am I audible and visible?
Yeah, you are.
Cool. Hi everyone, my name is Raghav. My pronouns are he, they. I'll take a clarification from opening in the beginning for sure, within like the first 4 minutes. Then I'll take a POI from closing as well. So just have them ready. Cool. Just let me set up my timer. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Last weekend, I was at a regional major that happened in India for a debating competition. I got till open quarterfinals, but then I got knocked out there. Here is what happened in my mind then. I was really angry with myself. I was frustrated, right? I didn't see a way out of it. But one thing I definitely did see was when I watched the open finals, I saw the open best speaker. I saw the speech they gave, and it really motivated me. I was like, oh yeah, this is the shit. This is what I could be as well one day. And what am I gonna do? I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna watch more of Temple projects, videos. I'm going to do other competitions like UCLA. I'm going to do better in other competitions. On the comparative, had I existed within the Gov paradigm, I would have seen the fact that I was the third open breaking team, and I wouldn't have been that angry in the first place, right? I wouldn't have had enough motivation to go ahead and then dream of a world where I can do better and then take those steps to make myself do better in future competitions. This is something opening opposition never talks about. Even if you do feel better in the present situation, why do you then go ahead and take steps to make your future better? This is where this debate lies as well, right? Because this debate is a retrospective one, which is to say that humanity has changed from the very beginning. This is the narrative that exists, right? If humanity evolves differently, had to do more than just identify that there is complacency. They had to tell us how this world is going to change. We're going to prove to you that you're going to be able to make better future decisions for yourself, and your life will be better in the longer term, even if you do get some sort of catharsis in the short term for those smaller instances like opening government and closing government talk about. But here is what happens. I just want to flag out one thing. Even if you do fail in a lot of situations, which we agree, sure, you maybe do, we think it's still okay because you have bigger goals to focus on. You constantly do think about improving. The fact that you work on improving yourself gives you some sort of happiness because you're like, oh yeah, I have made some sort of small gain today because I watched 10 debating workshops, because I've done 10 motion debriefs, which is to say that you enjoy the process itself because you're able to see the small changes you're making. We're going to take higher burdens than opening opposition in two ways. First of all, let's take the best case of opening government. They say that, oh well, what if you don't have power? We think that's a legitimate claim. Here's what happens. We think that you're still able to identify that you don't have power in the first place. And this, by the way, is not a knife to opening opposition. This is just us running a claim on that if opening government's claim is true, we think that you'd still identify you don't have power in the first place. What do you do then? Perhaps it's a hopeless fight if opening government is right, but then at least you stop fighting that hopeless fight. This is to say that you realize that you can't actually stop capitalism. You don't fight against companies like Apple and Google, right? Because you know that they're too big. You shift focus onto other more important aspects of your life or the way you can deal with them on a personal level. Perhaps you shift to using like open source software because you know that that's the easy way out for you to actually achieve the outcomes of living a better life that you actually dream of. Which is to say that if you have an issue with Starbucks coffee being like too pricey, you just shift the focus onto that, oh yeah, maybe I can just make coffee on my own and I can enjoy it because that coffee is super cheap. Right? You still have power over certain things in your life and you identify those things and you work within those limitations itself. So even if you don't have power, we think you're better off because you can imagine a counterfactual where you can achieve all of those things within the limited power you have. And this is uniquely happening on closing opposition because you're able to see this counterfactual in the first place because this is in your control. On government, you're never able to identify this counterfactual. You're just okay with having expensive Starbucks coffees and having expensive iPhones. For those reasons, we think that you're still better in that world. But if opening government says that they're going to unlock all of the benefits that opposition gives with hope, I don't see how you're going to pursue this hope in the first place. But even if you do, why does this hope actually push you to go ahead and constantly make strides for a better life? If OG framing is true, that things are out of your hands, I can just imagine a world where you give up because this hope is not enough for you, right? But even if you do not give up, even if you do have hope, a lot of times this hope hinges on external factors, right? You hope that if you are in a war-torn country, you hope that, oh, some other country is going to come save me that has the nuclear resources to actually bombard the other country that's like fucking us over, right? You do not actually realize that perhaps I need to form my own armies, which is to say you put your hope on external actors, but all of these external actors are always very uncertain. You can't really rely on them. That is to say, the only point at which you can have some sort of achievement and fulfillment in your life or just in the society in general is when you rely on yourself and you look towards a better outcome and you don't rely on hope, which is again why hope does not work out with OG and it's a wash. Before that, I'll take opening.
For your engagement with our case to be proven true in this debate, you have to prove that when we cannot control things, we don't stop to think how things could have been different. And so far as we stop to think about that, yes, we do feel dissatisfied and with a more intensified degree, as we proved to you.
That's literally what I talked about, but I'm going to have my second speaker talk about this extensively as well, if this is something you still have confusion on. Closing, do you have anything? 3.
Do people that are ambitious and successful that have pessimistic, half-empty view not exist in the status quo?
this is not about the status quo. This debate is about a half empty mindset or a half full mindset. This is a counterfactual that we imagine that does not exist. We think currently in society, people exist on like not binaries of that either you have a half empty mindset or you have a half full mindset. We're not talking about the status quo. I just want to make that clear. We're talking about a world where you have to weigh both of these worlds and the benefits and harm that they lead to. That's how you win this debate. Here is my here's what we're going to talk about, and this is something opening opposition never talks about. How does this half emptiness actually lead you to be more motivated? First of all, they say that, oh, this gives you inherent motivation because you want to do better in life. Sure, but what they don't tell you is that there are still some instances you fail, right? Gov says that you feel good in those smaller instances. Here is the thing. We think that you still feel bad in the later instances, right? Let's say you do actually lose the debate. You go ahead and you feel okay in the moment because you're like, oh yeah, at least I broke open third, even if I got knocked out in quarters. The debate gets over. You get home. It's been a week and you get knocked out in UCLA as well. What happens? You still don't have motivation to improve, right? The good feels you had were instantaneous, but you still want to do better in the future. You have something to force. You need something that forces you to work, right? What that really doesn't happen on the comparative, because on the comparative, in the longer term, you're worse off. You never reach your goals. You never work towards them, which is to say you're trapped in this perpetual cycle of just accepting the fact that, oh, I'm going to conform to whatever I have gotten till now and I'm not going to improve. So even if you do get some sort of instantaneous hope and you are better off in that instance is only lasting for a small period of time and you're kept in that instance multiple times and you don't change over a long period of time. This inherent motivation is something that's really important for you. It gets you out of the bed. It helps you like quit shit like alcoholism because you see positive stories around you in such a narrative that tell you that like, oh yeah, you can do this, right? This is the narrative in this world. You feel more confident and you're more likely to actually work towards those things. Second of all, I think you just shift different things like having a better, you change things like better, having different capitalistic decisions in such a world, which is to say capitalistic companies are more able to look towards like better research and development and think that, oh, we could just develop better products and they involve more money into it. They see things more optimistically. They see that, oh, climate change is something that can easily be solved and they're more ready to put money into this. That's something my second speaker will talk about as well. For those reasons, CO.
All right, thank Emil for round of remark. I'd like to welcome Government Whip whenever ready.
Yo, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay, cool. Just give me a couple seconds. Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, it became incredibly clear that CO is already out of this debate and completely out of touch with this round when I asked them the POI that do pessimistic or like ambitious pessimistic people that have a half full like a half empty view exist in the status quo, right? Is it possible for people to be ambitious and successful even with like pessimistic views in this world, right? And when he responded to that, it was very clear to me that they probably just didn't understand this at all, right? Because recognize that being ambitious and having an being ambitious and having a different outlook on life is like incredibly different things, right? These things are not mutually exclusive. What do I mean by this? This means that because like the info slide even said that things like counterfactuals of choosing between different phones, like, right, like from the most trivial shit to like even the biggest things, this is the way that you think about things, right? I don't think it's like something that's inherently tied to someone's ambition or someone's will to be successful. And like if we can prove that, like it kind of completely takes CO's entire mechanism out of this debate, right? So why can ambition even exist without this outlook? Because tons of people with many different kinds of perspective are successful and incredibly ambitious under the current status quo, right? These kinds of people already exist, so we can show a precedent that it's first of all possible to do, right? I think that this debate is more about how you respond to situations in the aftermath, right? The aftermath of when you make a decision, the aftermath of when you've experienced some kind of failure or some kind of crippling incident that has completely like changed the course of your life, right? We tell you that this debate is probably about this because like people make the most important decisions of their life during times of failure or during critical moments, right? These kinds of decisions are things that can like drastically change, like the course of your life overnight. Like for instance, if you're in a career that isn't working out for you, like the kind of decisions that you'd make when you feel like you're failing in this career is probably going to be incredibly important. These are the kinds of people that CG wants to protect, right? All right, now I'll be going over different teams and like with all their different things, all the different things that they said, and why they're completely out of the debate, right? I'll be starting with OO. And here's what we get from OO, right? The first idea we get from them is this idea of complacency and like this example of how you stay in toxic relationships. The second idea we get from them is this idea of like feeling intense happiness and like, the idea that you get from climbing the ladder of success, right? We tell you that a lot of this can be mitigated by the fact like that I have like 5 pieces of responses to this entire thing, right? The first to the idea of like toxic relationships recognizes this is oftentimes a function of like bad communication amongst these people, right? The first thing is that better communication is like independent from this kind of a mindset, right? The second reason is that you're more likely to be working through these issues under our side of the world than constantly trying to micromanage the situation, right? The third, right, and this is very important, recognize that toxicity can stem in and of itself from an half empty mindset. How is this the case? This is because the person can be toxic because they're simply not satisfied with the way that their partners are dealing with things, and you're constantly thinking, oh, my relationship could be so much better if my partner was like this, and you start micromanaging the relationship, right? Fourthly, and this is something that Tanzim already touched on, right? Recognize that the world doesn't automatically become binary, right? It's still possible for people, people are still capable of formulating thought of the other perspective, of being a predominantly half empty but predominantly half full world, but also thinking along the half empty lines, right? Because if this were not the case, that is probably a world where competitive debate doesn't exist, and that would be a really sad world, right? The conclusion of this is like your friends can probably identify when your like partners are being toxic or when situations are shitty, and they can probably call that out, right? The way that we weigh against OO is that OO is only restricted to situations that you can have full amounts of control over, right? And and the reason why this is bad is because they completely restrict themselves to a very small subset of things. We tell you that like in situations that are out of your control is probably where this mindset is the most useful, right? We tell you that the kinds of decisions that people will be making in situations where they maybe fail the course, right? Where they maybe failing at a career, or right, or maybe they fail an exam, and situations like that, right? Those are the kinds of people that are most important to protect, because recognize that statistically most people are at the center or to the left of the bell curve, right? People have more average experiences and experience more failures on general, right? So in this instance, we win on first the numbers because our mechanism is more useful in more situations. Secondarily, we're like more careful in situations where people are the more vulnerable, and thirdly we give like better solutions to situations where out of your control, right? Now, where do we weigh up against OG? Recognize that OG gives you like a point of mental health, but CG covers more critical situations, right? What kind of critical situations are we talking about here? These are situations where you're like literally on the brink of suicide, right? We're literally on the brink of suicide, right? Where the thought that maybe this situation could be like not worse is like giving you an opportunity to live one more day, where you could probably go and seek out some kind of help that will give you some kind of solace, right? Before I move on to further weighing, I'll take the POI from opening.
Protests need critical mass to succeed, sometimes taking extreme life risks. If people are grateful for the scrap, how will societal change happen, and how the upcoming generations are better in your world?
Okay, I got it. Cool. Okay, recognize that Tanzim has given you multiple mechanisms as to how this happens, right? The first thing that we tell you is that social movements are made up of individuals, right? So when you're looking at this at an individualistic way, every single time any kind of social movement sets some kind of huge setback, it like incredibly demotivates this individual, right? Let's say you're someone that is aligning yourself with like the feminist movement, right? And you're constantly facing setbacks over and over, right? At this point in time, you start thinking, hey, maybe my life could be better than associating with a failing cause and moving on to something different, right? This is the individualistic mechanism that we provide under our side of the house that will allow you to create like more societal change, right? The reason that we win this debate is because our points outweigh every other point in this debate, because first of all, Tanzim gives you reason as to why there are structural changes that are occurring through gratefulness, right? Where we give you like multiple different mechanisms of like how you can have treaties and laws, and how societies become more progressive because of like this idea of gratefulness, where we give you the example of like indigenous communities, right? We tell you how like more movements are being bought into, where we give you an individualistic view into what you could be thinking when you're facing some kind of setback in this situation, right? And finally, we tell you that this debate is like probably about in situations where you're undergoing some kind of failure, or you're in the most critical situations where you're making any kind of decision, right? Because of all these reasons, we're very proud to propose and probably definitely win this debate.
All right, thanks, Gav, for a wonderful remark. And finally, I'd like to invite the opposition whip whenever ready.
Am I clearly audible and visible?
Yeah, you are.
Let me just start my timer. Okay, a couple of shout outs before I start. I think what Raghav said is true, that we faced a big setback. I just want to tell that from reserve break to ESL finalists, big jump. Thank you, because it's like 5 a.m. here and we're still debating. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to go out and analyze what happened in the opening half. Then I'm going to prove to you what is the closing options path to victory, and then why we take this round. First of all, what happened in closing opposition? At a point of time that both the houses want to claim certain benefits, but they want to, like, they do not go out and be competitive and neither weigh their benefits as to what the other side is claiming. I think that all of the clashes that happening at opening opposition and opening government are a wash. I'm going to prove to you, and I'm going to win all those classes by the weighing that comes at our at closing opposition, and then take the round. But then secondly, what's more important? I think opening government and closing government are correct in pointing out that what happens when you actually fail. But then secondly, what happens when you actually don't have any control in the circumstances? How do you still stay on the grind, and how do you still go out and have any sort of benefits that that opening up wants to talk about? But then firstly, I'm going to give 3 pieces of mitigations that entirely goes out to symmetrize all of opening government and to an extent closing government's case. One, first on nostalgia and gratefulness. At a point of time, both houses concede that you obviously are moving forward in life. This looks like you still like have access on benefits on both sides. This means that both sides contend that you are going to move forward by the help of this narrative. I prove to you that on both sides you exclusively have nostalgia to look back to. This looks like no matter what mechanism to use that you use to go forward, you still look back and think that, oh, I have made some level of progress. I think at that point of time, things like nostalgia, things like past friends and memories, etc., can still make you happy and content and feel good about your small victories. I think that Gov explanation that the only way you feel content and grateful for the progress you've made is because of their mechanism is then mitigated to an extent that we prove to you that you can still access this level of gratefulness, etc., on the other ways access as well. But then secondly, this comes on in terms of like how gratefulness happens. I think they prove to us that gratefulness happens because you're somehow like complaining less and you are not less frustrated. Understand that frustration still exists. What opening government and closing government both had to do is the idea that this gratefulness is weighed against the idea of frustration, external stresses that you face, and then this gratefulness becomes more important than all of the external stresses, and you go and still like stay on the grind. This looks like even if you're not breaking multiple times, you realize that, oh, at least I'm still debating, and then they prove that why you're not likely to get taken up by the frustration of not breaking, and the frustration of not breaking is not going to take over the idea of gratefulness. We think that this is a weak narrative, and that is why your frustration, external stresses is going to take over. This looks like your motivation is going to die out. At a point of time, the closing opposition specifically comes in the round and prove to you that why are you more likely to stay on the grind, and why are you more likely to go out and access this motivation on a better level and still have some level of like benefits, and then those are the only benefits that start in understand that opening opposition claims that, oh, the journey is more important, and the amount of time, the amount of way that you stay on this journey, etc., becomes the more tipping point in this debate. We prove to you that why this journey actually materializes and how you're actually on that grind. We tell you that this intrinsic motivation further goes out and outpowers any form of external stresses. Why? One, your intrinsic motivation goes out and like motivates you to the point that you see something that is being achievable. This looks like for every losses you make, you have a bigger picture. This looks like even if I don't break in this tournament, I can probably go out and perceive that I break in another tournament. Look what closing government tries to do. Closing government comes and says that this is not ambition and this is not this debate is about pessimism and optimism. And I think that is true, right? That's what we're debating about. We tell you that insofar as this debate is not about ambition and pessimism, they cannot also go out and point out the harms of individualism on offside. We think at the point of time this is true. This debate then becomes on which narrative is better able to give you more benefits on either side of the house. If insofar as that closing opposition proves to you and mechanizes to you that how the benefits come and how like the most vulnerable stakeholders identified both governments are still better, we take this debate, right? But then lastly, I'm going to tell you that why resentment, etc., becomes worse, etc. One, that Raghav already materialized for you why motivation is so important to you and why motivation is only acted on our side. The way this to you both claims that he comes from opening government, we tell you that why like you always see the bigger picture, etc. But let's look at the scale of impact of this. I think the scale of impact is much large on our side because we tell you that like this affects your day-to-day life. This looks like you go out and understand that at a point of time you are probably not succeeding and you probably do fail, you still have other things and avenues. This looks like if closing government wants to talk about people who are under a genocide, I think there are literally people right now in Palestine who still make reels and talk about their daily lives and daily vlogs, or still go out and have some level of small business trying to adapt. This looks like what Raghav analyzed for you. You realize that if one thing is not working out, something else might work out and may work out. This intrinsic motivation is marginally better in face of external stresses because we have proven to you how external stresses exist in society, but closing on opening government, neither they weigh out that why this motivation or the gratefulness that they want on their side stays up after the 5th minute, stays up against anything. At that point of time, we are better able to mechanize to you that why this intrinsic motivation becomes better, specifically in like situation where you can't control. Understand opening opposition does not engage with it. They're actually uncomparative with their claims. We tell you on comparatively what this looks like and is better. Comparatively, let's say you don't have this motivation, you're less likely to go out and utilize the fact that you can get better. At a point of time, they had to prove that why complacency doesn't happen. We're gonna tell you on the comparative why complacency happens. You dwell in the present too much. This looks like even if you are making progress, you never objectively look at the progress as to comparatively as a compounding effect. You think that this only exists as of now and it might not and might maybe exist. I'm just happy that it exists right now. I think this is important because at a point of time this happens, you're never able to materialize future goals. You're never able to understand your potential, understand your like what can you achieve in this life. I think that's extremely bad for the stakeholders that both opening government, closing government like wants to materialize. But then lastly, engaging with closing government extension and why this is important. POI. Go ahead.
I already proved to you, like, when there's also motivation in our side of the house, we also want things in our side. The difference is that an unwanted desire, which is more likely than wanted desires, hurts less because you overthink less about how much it could have been better.
How debates happen is you have to weigh your benefits as to the benefits others. At a point of time, you don't weigh your benefits or the likelihood of your benefits in the face of existing struggles. You do not take this round. But then secondly, engaging with closing government on the extension of why this debate is about when you make decisions at your worst peril, etc. We think when you're under extreme stress and duress because of the failures you have faced and you want to go out and do better, you are much more likely to go out and look long-term goals. You are better able to materialize like what you have right now and how is that going to make you achieve better things in life in the long term. I think that makes you make better decisions as compared to whatever mechanism that closing government gives you in terms of why you're like unable to access anything good. What has closing opposition given into this round and why we take this round? We tell you that when intrinsic motivation is actually the cursor that why you go out and materialize any benefits on off bench. But then secondly, we prove to you that why most of the gov bench cases mitigatory and they never weigh anything out to prove any of their impacts. But then lastly, we prove to you that even if you fail, you still have mechanisms to go out and help you, that you understand that you inherently have some potential. On opening government, your potential is unmaterialized because you never realize you have any. Extremely proud to oppose.
All right, thank opposition whip and thank everyone for this amazing final. Result will be announced later, and you all can just left the room